welcome again to another expert talk series from Everything ALS. I have an ask. It's coming right from my heart. As you are aware, research on ALS is continuously progressing, and at Everything ALS, we are dedicated to uncovering new discoveries, aiding in early detection, and working forward, finding a cure for ALS. You can assist us by participating in our speech study. The purpose of the speech study is to enhance the diagnosis and prognosis of ALS. We are seeking participants to provide 5 recordings, each one lasting 15 minutes once a month, for a total of 75 minutes over 5 months. We welcome healthy participants as well as individuals diagnosed or probable with ALS to join us. To enroll, please visit everythingals.org/speech project and fill out our form. Thank you very much. And that email address will be in our chat, so you will have it available. With that, I will turn it over to you, Sarita.
Thank you, McFinn. And I will turn over to Dr. Shelena Lalji. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarita. Thank you, McFinn. Hello, everybody. We are so excited to have this incredible expert talk series today, with the topic being something that I personally am very, very passionate about, and that is implantable BCI technology, as well as we're going to talk about some non-invasive options as well. This is something that's really, really interesting, as well as very scientifically advanced, as you can imagine. There's a lot of incredible work being done in this field, and we are so grateful to all the panelists today to do all the work that they're doing, as well as take out the time to come share it with our community. This is something that would change and impact so many lives of people who are no longer able to communicate effectively, as well as control their environment effectively, and really makes a huge impact on patients' lives, on people's lives living with ALS. As most of you know, my husband has ALS. He was diagnosed in 2017, and this is really something that we're all very passionate about. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is introduce our wonderful panel of speakers. I'll keep this introduction relatively brief so that they can have enough time to present their research and all the wonderful work that they're doing. I'm going to start with Dr. Craig Mermel. Dr. Craig Mermel is the president, is the president and chief product officer of Precision Neuroscience. Dr. Mermel oversees Precision's product development and the path to patent application, as well as the company's use of data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. A pathologist trained in the study of cancer genomics, he holds an MD and a PhD in genetics from Harvard University, and he was previously at Google and Apple, and together with Precision's co-founder and chief science officer, Ben Rappaport, Dr. Mermel co-founded the digital health company Symbionics, which developed pioneering health software for wearable technology and was acquired by Apple in 2014. I will now introduce the next couple of speakers so that everybody's introduction is done at the beginning, and then we'll turn right over to the panelists and them speaking. Dr. Spencer Kellis is next, who is the senior team lead for data science, software, and clinical at Blackrock Neurotech, and the research assistant professor of neurological surgery at Keck School of Medicine of USC in Los Angeles. Prior to joining Blackrock, he was a member of the professional staff at the California Institute of Technology and director of engineering for the Chen Brain-Machine Interface Center at Caltech. He helped to manage and run a clinical trial of intracortical brain-machine interfaces for quadriplegia due to spinal cord injury. He has received several degrees, MS and PhD in electrical engineering from University of Utah and BS in electrical engineering from Brigham Young University. Next, we have Andreas Forsland, who is the founder and CEO of Cognixion One, which is a brain-computer interface that is integrated with augmented reality and a personalized adaptive AI co-pilot that is on board. It has wide-ranging applications and implications because it has a future metaverse where our minds and bodies are immersed in the user experience. Their primary focus is ensuring that the future of AR is universally accessible with the help of biological sensors and intuitive user interfaces. It has been designed to assist millions of people with complex disabilities, and they can do this by using their face, their eyes, and now brain as a direct control interface from mobile and AR. It is also going to address the needs of 500 million people worldwide with physical and communication challenges. Cognixion, of note, was recognized as a top 21 neurotech startup to watch, recently won the Red Dot Best of the Best Award for AR and VR, and was nominated for the Red Dot Luminary Award, the Edison Award, and Singularity Global Grand Challenge. It's also led by luminaries, including the creator Siri. And then we have Chris Ullrich. Chris Ullrich has over 25 years of experience in the technology industry. Chris began their career in 1995 as a mission analyst at Flight Dynamics at Telesat Canada and as the Chief Technology Officer at Cognixion. In 1998, they moved to Virtual Technologies as a senior computational mathematician and later joined Immersion Corporation as a senior director of research, where they identified new opportunity areas and conducted research and promoted new technologies. Chris returned later to Immersion Corporation as the Vice President of User Experience and Analytics, the Vice President of UX, and Chief Technology Officer. In 2020, Chris co-founded Haptics Industry Forum and currently serves on the board of directors as a founding board member. Chris is also the co-chair of Enterprise XR Working Group, and in 2022, they joined Cognixion as the Chief Technology Officer. With that, I would love to turn it over to Sarita. We have an incredible lineup, as you guys can see, with the introductions and the bios, and super excited for all of us to hear from them today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shell. I will now turn over the presentation to Craig.
All right, first things first, can everyone see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, before I get started, thank you so much to Everything ALS for asking us to be here today. I'm really excited to share with you some of the work we're doing at Precision Neuroscience that we hope will one day have a major impact in the lives of individuals and their families living with ALS. I also want to thank you, Dr. Shelena, for the warm introduction to my co-panelists, who are all peers and colleagues in this important space. And most importantly, to everyone here for joining us and giving your time and attention to hear a little bit about what we're doing. And I look forward to hopefully a robust and interesting conversation to follow these talks. In the next few slides, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Precision Neuroscience and the work we're doing. So we were, within the field of brain-computer interface companies, we're one of the newer bases. So we were founded in 2021. Our mission is really to deliver life-changing brain-computer interface technology to millions of people living with the consequences of devastating neurologic conditions, including conditions like spinal cord injury, stroke, and importantly, ALS. Importantly, we're proud to be one of several companies that have been working in this space to develop and deliver this technology into the lives of patients and their families, because we think that this is going to usher in a new field in medicine where conditions like ALS, which have not had a lot of treatment options or hope, will hopefully have in the coming years and decade an increasing number of options for improving quality of life and function for people living with these diseases. Just to kick off, since I'm first, I'll take a slide to just introduce the concept of a brain-computer interface and how we think about this at Precision Neuroscience. So very simply, a brain-computer interface, we define it as a medical device that creates a direct communication pathway between the brain and digital devices. These digital devices, like the ones we're on right now, are computers and our smartphones, but this could also include other types of devices like mobilized wheelchairs, prosthetic limbs, increasingly, and almost everything in our world these days is digital by nature. So a BCI has the potential to really create this new pathway between the human brain and lots of devices in our world. While this idea sounds like science fiction, it's been around for a few decades. There have already been dozens of patients with individuals living with paralysis from a variety of different causes, including ALS and spinal cord injury, who've had versions of this technology implanted, mostly as part of research studies. And they've been able to demonstrate the ability of this technology to assist in restoring critical functions, including speech, movement of computer cursors, but also prosthetic limbs, wheelchairs, and other types of devices, and really demonstrate that this technology has the potential to really give back quite a bit of function that's been lost to the underlying disease. Unfortunately, as of today in 2024, there's still no device yet on the market that can be broadly available that you can go to your doctor and get prescribed. But at Precision, as well as some of the other companies you're hearing about, we're working very hard to try to make this technology part of the standard of care in medicine, to achieve regulatory approval and to really make this part of the mainstream offering. And we think that as the technology progresses, it will help an increasingly wider group of people living with different types of conditions and really have a profound impact on the human condition. When we're designing these technologies, and I'll tell you over the next few slides how Precision has approached this problem of building a brain-computer interface. There are a number of important considerations of how you can build a device that is safe, that supports high bandwidth communication with the brain, and has important properties like how this technology, how long will it last, and how scalable it will be. And at Precision, we have a particular view on how this technology should be developed to maximize some important characteristics. But I want to say at the outset, we definitely do not see this as a winner-take-all technology. A lot of the different companies, we're all working on the same problem, and we may have a variety of different approaches to how we sort of achieve these things. Just like there's no one individual living with ALS, we all have diverse brains, diverse journeys, diverse capabilities and limitations. We think that the different technologies that you're going to see, some talked about here and others that you might read about in the media, are going to have their role and different strengths as the technology develops. And we think ultimately it's going to be the individuals, the communities affected by these disorders that benefit by having a variety of options available. So, really excited to be part of this conversation and talk about how we see this technology developing and becoming available to people around the world. So here at Precision, this is a picture of the sort of core backbone of the brain-computer interface system that we're developing. We call it the layer 7 cortical interface. And as you can see here, it's a very thin, flexible film of material. So it's about 20 microns thick. That's like less thick than a piece of Scotch tape. And it's very flexible and conformable. And this device sits gently on top of the surface of the brain, the cortical surface, where it can record electrical activity from the brain surface without causing any damage. And it can be easily removed and reversed without, again, leaving any evidence that it's been on the brain surface. This system, as you can see there on this thin film, we've actually embedded over 1,000 tiny little electrodes. Those are those little dots, the metallic dots that you see printed there. Each one of those electrodes is about 50 microns in diameter, which is the same width of a typical human neuron, where it can both record and stimulate electrical information from a very small region of the brain. So what you're going to get, and I'll show you a picture of this in the next slide, what you get by placing this device on the human brain is essentially a high resolution video of the brain's activity in the area that you've placed this electrode array. We've designed the system to be modular, which means that you can put not just one of these little modules on one of these electrode arrays on the surface, but you can actually put multiple, which is important if you want to cover different functional areas of the brain, so areas that are responsible for speech and movement at the same time. Or if you think about, we have two hemispheres of the brain, so you can place these electrode arrays on each side of the brain at the same time. And at Precision, we've developed a minimally invasive surgical delivery approach that can basically place these anywhere on the brain surface without requiring a big invasive surgery. So we found a way to basically make small incisions in the skin and bone that allow us to slide these very thin electrode arrays onto the brain surface in a very minimally invasive procedure. So this is the core backbone of our technology. Excitingly, even though the company is only 3 years old, we've already started to test this device in human patients. Before I go forward, I want to be very clear. These are not yet individuals with ALS or paralysis. These are temporary implantations that are being done inside the operating room of a patient that's having a neurosurgical procedure for some other reason. So in this case, in our first patients we did at West Virginia University last year. These were all patients that were having brain surgery to remove a brain tumor, but we used the opportunity where the brain was exposed for the surgeon to do that operation to place that layer 7 device on the human brain and record the electrical activity. And this was the electrical activity while these patients were awake and actually speaking to the surgeon. So we're able to actually record the activity of the brain as it engages in behaviors that are important, like speaking and movement. So this is, and this video, hopefully it's coming through okay, is basically what your brain looks like at high resolution. So each one of these dots represents one of the 1,000 electrode channels. This is basically unfiltered. The color here represents the voltage. So when there's more activity, you're going to see that as red and yellow dots. And when the voltage is lower, you're going to see that as blue dots. And this picture of the human brain really has never been seen before at this resolution and in this way. And it's really kind of remarkable and mesmerizing to watch. This is what our brains are doing as we're thinking and speaking and communicating. And so these studies are allowing us to begin to learn how to correlate the electrical activity of the brain as it imagines or thinks about speaking into an understanding of what the intent and communication is trying to see. And one of our surgical collaborators, Dr. Conrad, who's the chairman of the Department of Neurosurgery at West Virginia, said it was as if I was seeing the brain think in real time. And we love that quote. We've since scaled this up, so we're now enrolling patients in similar intraoperative settings at 3 sites. As of last week, we've now completed 16 human implantations in various hospitals and settings, and we continue to grow that. We're now doing about one patient every week or two. So it's really rapidly growing and teaching us amazing things about the brain, and importantly, how we can translate pictures of the brain that look like this into algorithms and software that can convert that into control signals for computer devices. That system I've shown you, while it's important for researching and teaching us quite a bit about the brain activity, is not the system that's going to help an individual living with ALS. And this is a diagram of the technology that we're working on developing. This is still several years, I want to be very clear, still several years away from being ready for being tested in human patients, but we're working very hard every day to try to bring this into patients and make this a reality. The system this electrode, you can see my mouse, this electrode array is the same layer 7 I showed you sitting on the surface of the brain. It's the only piece of our technology that actually sits on the brain itself. That connects to a little implant that sits just under between the skull and the scalp, where those electrical signals are recorded and digitized and turned into essentially a digital version of the brain's activity. That then gets passed down through a lead. If anyone's been familiar or seen deep brain stimulation devices that are used for treatment of Parkinson's, this form factor is very similar to that. So the electrical information from the brain passes down to a battery and a communication unit that will sit just in the chest wall. And that's how we power the system and also communicate between the electrical activities recorded in the brain and the outside world. And so this is the system that we're working on developing. The technology required to make all of these components fully implantable takes a long time to develop, but we're well underway and hoping to begin human testing of this system in 2027. Lastly, before I pass it over to my co-panelists to tell you about their companies and technologies, we just want to say we are incredibly motivated by the clinical potential of this technology, and really thinking every day about the individuals and patients we speak to and who we know want to get back to living their lives, right? So all this technology is really cool and amazing, but it's not going to do anything if it sits in the laboratory. We've made a very intentional effort at Precision to get very involved very early in engaging with communities across the different conditions that we think this technology can help. There are over 3.5 million people in the United States that with their various forms of motor paralysis and few interventions, and we know that this is badly needed. And so these are just some of the quotes. We read and think about these quotes every day, and this is what inspires us to continue to work hard to bring this technology into the world. Specifically, we have an entire arm which I manage, and I think I saw Jake Sabia from our team who leads this effort is on this call. Of explicit patient and community engagement. So this has been something we've done from the very beginning, is to try to reach out and understand deeply the needs of the different communities that we think this technology can serve, including spinal cord injury, stroke, and ALS. What does this look like? We're constantly doing interviews, phone calls, and email conversations with different individuals from these communities, from caregivers, from KOLs and experts that treat these communities to try to understand the needs of the communities. And importantly, we reach out to different advocacy groups, community partners that can help us both access these individuals and help connect us with resources so that we can make sure we're constantly getting smart. Last year, we actually formed a community advisory board, which is a standing body that we treat just like our own board of directors. This is a group of 10 individuals with lived experience across these conditions, spinal cord injury, stroke, and ALS, that we meet with on a regular basis to keep them informed of our progress, but also to learn deeply about the needs, their experience, their lived experience with these, with both the underlying condition as well as the available technologies that either do or do not meet the needs of the community. And of course, we're constantly trying to learn from literature and from existing research that's been done before. So we are very proud of this. Of course, it takes a lot of time and effort. And part of the reason we're here and talk to you about it is to invite those of you on this call that are interested in learning more about our technology, but importantly, teaching us about what you think, what you need to see for this technology to have an impact in your life. To reach out and engage with us. We'd love to speak with you. We have both a patient and caregiver of ALS on our community advisory board, as well as one caregiver whose family member unfortunately passed away a few years ago. So we want to continue to build inroads into the community. So really grateful for the opportunity to be here with all of you and share what we're up to and also answer any questions. So thank you very much for your time. I put our email here. This engagement at Precision Neuro will get you directly connected to us, but also happy to take your questions when we get to the Q&A section.
Thank you so much, Dr. Craig Mermel. That was amazing. And I can certainly vouch for the fact that most of the companies, of course, including Precision, they do a fantastic job reaching out to the community, and they're very open to input from people who are affected directly by these conditions and really can benefit from these technologies. Also want to mention before I turn it over to the next panelist that please do send your questions as they come up in the chat. We will be taking note of all of them, and then we have Q&As after all four have spoken. So with that, I'd like to introduce the next speaker, and please take it away, Spencer.
Thank you. I just want to confirm that you can see the screen okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so again, I like Craig, I want to say just a very warm thank you to the Everything ALS group and those of you here in the community and audience. Really appreciate this chance to talk with you and share some of the work that we're doing at Blackrock. Today I'll be talking a little bit about some of the tools that are needed to move implantable BCIs along the road to more widespread access. I'll share some of the work that I and others at Blackrock are doing to understand and improve these tools. And I'll touch a little bit on how individuals and the community of ALS patients and their caregivers can contribute to this process. I also want to say up front that many of my slides feature photos of some of the BCI pioneers that I and others have worked with. And I'll try and introduce them and just say a little bit about them as I go through the presentation. These are, these are individuals I deeply respect and admire, and so I wanted to honor their role and contributions to this work. And of course, each of them has their own path into this community. Some through spinal cord injury, others through ALS and other conditions. So I'll start with a short video. This is actually a video from the University of California, San Francisco. It was created by a neurosurgeon named Dr. Eddie Chang, who has been designing a BCI system for speech decoding. And so, he's used some Blackrock technology to record electrical activity from the surface of the brain. But everything else apart from that is something that he and his team have built, all of the algorithms for decoding speech and everything like that. So he's working with an individual named Anne who has ALS and has just done some really amazing things in terms of decoding her speech and producing an avatar with her voice.
I'm Eddie Chang. I'm a neurosurgeon at UC San Francisco. My lab works on understanding how the brain processes language. One of our projects is to develop a device that can help people who have lost ability to speak to once again communicate. We've just published a new study in the journal Nature that builds upon our previous work, which showed that it's possible to record neural activity from a paralyzed person who is attempting to speak and translate that activity into words and sentences as text on a screen. In this new study, our translation of attempted speech into text reached about 78 words per minute. We also show that it's possible to translate the neural signals not only into text on a screen, but also directly into audible synthetic speech with accurate facial movement on an avatar.
I think you are wonderful.
This device reads the blueprint of instructions the brain is using to give to the muscles in the vocal tract. Our goal in incorporating audible speech with a live action avatar is to allow for the full embodiment of human speech communication, which is so much more than just words.
Believe me, it is better.
For us, this is an exciting new milestone that moves our device beyond proof of concept, and we think it will soon become a viable option for people who are paralyzed.
So that's, as you can see, the BCIs, like the BCI system that Dr. Cheng developed, have a huge amount of transformative potential. I think that was, there are other videos you can find on the web from that group and from that BCI pioneer. And I think it was just a very meaningful experience for her to have this ability to communicate. And especially that they developed this avatar that they modeled after her and her voice. So for Anne, this transformative potential was communication. This photo I have on this slide is of a woman named Nancy, who was a participant, a BCI pioneer from Los Angeles, California. For her, it was more on the artistic side. She played a piano with her BCI, for example, and did a couple of other sort of artistic things. Really, there's so many different opportunities for BCIs, but it's clear that as we try to bring BCIs out of the research space and into the commercial market, we need clear safety and performance data across the board. And that applies to really every person or entity that interacts with them. So for example, patients need to be able to decide which product to acquire. Clinicians need to be able to make decisions about which products to recommend. Insurers need to know which products to pay for. And the FDA needs to know which products to approve. And it comes back in many instances, in many ways, back to the medical device companies developing these systems to answer these questions. So the question is, how do we answer these questions? What's the way that we can communicate the safety and the performance data necessary for all of these different individuals and entities? So one of the most important tools for that is a tool called a clinical outcome assessment, or a COA. This is something that the FDA, I think, has largely defined and driven over many years, not just for BCIs, for all medical devices and even for drugs. And because BCIs are such a novel medical device, there's a lot of work right now going into figuring out what kinds of clinical outcome assessments can we use to measure the performance and the safety of a BCI. So a clinical outcome assessment describes how a person feels, functions, or survives. Now you might recognize the individual in this photo that I have on this slide as an individual from a presentation a couple months ago by Dr. Lee Hochberg from the BrainGate group. He's an individual that with ALS who's been using a BCI system, and the BrainGate group in particular has done a lot of work involving patients and these kinds of patient-reported outcomes that are part of the clinical outcome assessment tools to design their system and make sure that their system operates well with the individuals using these systems. So there are four kinds of clinical outcome assessments. There's a patient-reported outcome, or a PRO, a clinician-reported outcome, an observer-reported outcome, and performance outcomes. And each of these have their specific roles and utility in terms of evaluating the performance and the safety of a medical device, including BCIs. But I want to spend a little bit of time specifically on the patient-reported outcomes, because those are such an important part of this entire process. And in fact, the FDA really strongly encourages the use of patient-reported outcomes. If you search on the FDA for this term, patient-reported outcome, you'll find a lot of guidance documents that are instructing and educating the community, the medical device companies, et cetera, on how we might be able to incorporate these things into our development. So patient-reported outcome measures are unique in that they ask the patient's own perception of their health status or quality of life. And so the responses are coming directly from the patients without any amendment or interpretation from clinicians or from anybody else. Nathan, who's shown in this photo from Pittsburgh, has had a BCI implanted for, I believe, 8 years now. He's the longest implant to my knowledge. And over the years has given a huge amount of feedback in terms of these kind of patient-reported outcomes to his team at the University of Pittsburgh. So PROs can help to evaluate things like the look and the feel of the device that are very difficult to measure from a clinical perspective, the experience of using a device in daily life, and also adverse events that might occur outside of the clinic that, maybe a patient or their caregiver might keep a diary of, these kinds of things. So I mentioned that the FDA is really emphasizing a great deal developing these COAs specifically for BCIs. And in fact, they put out a call for proposals to study these things specifically. And Blackrock applied for this grant opportunity from the FDA and was awarded the grant. So I just want to describe a little bit about what we're doing for this grant and how it applies. So as you can see, the grant is intended to study clinical outcome assessments for communication brain-computer interface devices, which they're calling CBCIs, and specifically for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. To expand on that just a little bit, this is to support and inform the future development and use of COAs for CBCIs in patients with ALS. And this grant is broken up into 2 phases. The first phase, the UH2 phase, includes a systematic landscape analysis of the available literature, relevant data sources, and interviews with key opinion leaders to document COAs for CBCIs, use clinically, and identify gaps between the current outcome assessments that are available in the literature today and the kinds of outcome measures that could demonstrate functional benefits for ALS patients with severe communication limitations. So that's the first phase, which is 1 year. The second phase is intended to focus on patient and caregiver focus groups. And that will collect information about the symptoms, functional status, and the perceived benefits and risks of communication BCIs. And so where we are right now is we're almost about to complete the first phase where we've done the systematic literature review and interviews with these key opinion leaders. And we're then going to start the second phase, assuming that the FDA approves this transition from the first to the second phase, where we start actually working directly with ALS patients and their caregivers. So I wanted to provide just a little bit of preliminary information. We reviewed 13,000 abstracts from a search of the literature from some databases. And out of all of those abstracts, we found only 17 clinical outcome assessments that were relevant to to communication BCI. This individual in the photo is Pat, who was part of another BCI study at Stanford, which was also a communication BCI and achieved some really impressive performance in terms of word rates and accuracy. So the question is, does the perfect tool exist? And the short answer is no. Most tools that we found, while relevant, were really geared towards stroke. However, there are some good tools for communication-based aspects of quality of life. Those things seem to apply pretty well. But also there are very few studies geared towards what we're calling, and I think is somewhat of a growing term, these digital activities of daily life, which encapsulates things like interactions with mobile phones and things like that. So moving forward in this next phase of the grant, we've identified a couple of clinical partners across the US to organize and conduct focus groups over the next 6 to 12 months or so. As with the first stage, we will aggregate all this data and publish the anonymized data And so it will be accessible to the public. And the intention is really that this inform best practices, not just for Blackrock. This is really a community-wide kind of an effort. And we're making a conscientious effort not to get limited into any kind of technology that Blackrock itself might work on. So I want to highlight that development of these BCIs begins with understanding the needs of the community that we're developing them for. And I think Craig made this point very well in his presentation. There are two organizations that I think are really relevant for this community. One is the Implantable Brain-Computer Interface Collaborative Community, and another is the BCI Pioneers Coalition. Both of these are available. Members of the community can join them and contribute to some of the ongoing processes for setting standards and ethical guidelines and things like this. So I want to say thank you again for listening, and very, very interested and welcome any comments or feedback you might have. My email address is here on the slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spencer. That was very, very good. We're getting several questions, and we're going to get to those after the next presentation. So our next presenter, whom I introduced a little bit earlier, is Andreas Forsland, the founder and CEO of Cognixion. He will be presenting for Cognixion, and then thereafter, Chris Ullrich and Andreas will both be on the panel answering the questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Andreas. It's all yours.
Excellent, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Super, and you can see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Beautiful. All right, well, wonderful. Well, thank you all again. I wanted to share a bit about what we're doing. You may or may not have heard about some of the work we've been doing at Cognixion. We actually started the company in 2014, so we've actually been in business for about 10 years. We started as a company called SmartStones, where we were building gesture recognition technology for nonverbal speech for kids with autism via apps, as well as like an accessory that would do gesture recognition. But as a result of that, we started to develop relationships with many different communities, ranging from traumatic brain injuries and stroke and CP and MS and so on. And then what we realized was that the ideal solution was not actually a point solution, but something that everybody could use. So we pivoted the company in 2016 to start to develop our own brain-computer interface. But ours is a bit different than the others in the sense that we're dealing with a non-invasive brain-computer interface. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about that today. Since we've been in business for a while, we've been very much user-centered first. So we've sort of started out as being technology agnostic. As I said, we started with the community and really listened to the community and said, what's the commonality between everyone that we've been talking to? So we've developed a user advisory council we call the Brainiacs. We have about 200 members worldwide. Most of those are in the US and Canada. It equates to about 7,000 years of lived experience, which is about a 7-to-1 ratio between an outside user advisor and partner to us and an internal employee. So we definitely appreciate and value outside perspective. That includes caregivers as well as neurologists, neurosurgeons, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists, ABAs, et cetera, as well as AT specialists. You'll see some faces here that you may recognize. Audie Barkin was a good close friend of ours. We're based in Santa Barbara, California. We're also, our R&D centers in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. So what the current state of the art is, as far as computer access, is eye tracking as far as the sensor of last resort. So ultimately, most folks here on the call are looking at which is the best eye tracking system, or which is the best communications interface, and which one's the most mobile, essentially, that I can use in different environments. What you see on the left is an individual. This is actually Audie Barkin in his living room. You can see that he's reclined in his Permobile powered wheelchair, and he has a trach, and he has a mounting system that's holding a tablet with an eye tracking system on top, lots of wires, lots of things kind of occluding his view of the world around him and those he wants to communicate with. Meanwhile, what you see on the right is our system. We created this heads-up display, which is called augmented reality. Many of you may be familiar with virtual reality, which is like Meta and some of these other companies. They build the fully enclosed visual headset. Ours is much more about being able to see the real world all around you. So we have a tinted lens that's reflective, and it reflects holograms or graphics of computer applications inside of the visor. But what's neat about that is that it can be controlled with a number of input methods. If you still have cervical control with your head, you can drive those apps with your head movement. If you have eye tracking, you can be able to use eye tracking, or if you have the ability to fixate and mentally pay attention to objects, you can interact with your brain as well. So what I wanted to share with you is that this is a big leap in an evolution, not just in the sensing technology, moving the bar to expand accessibility beyond eye gaze into non-invasive BCI, but also advancing the portability of computing to be closer to the body. So migrating from tablet PCs to a heads-up display. And then thinking about the next generation of communication and user interface, moving away from keyboards. Not entirely, we still believe there's a place for keyboards, but really developing AI that can be personalized to the individual so that you have to do a lot less work to say the things that you want to say in a much faster way. So what I'm happy to share with is that last spring, we received FDA breakthrough device status for our system called the Cognixion 1. And this was intentionally designed for medical reimbursement through Medicare and Medicaid so that you could get it with little to no out-of-pocket expense, including support for setup, et cetera. And we've developed a number of apps that are slated for that device, including augmentative communication applications, including AI. We also have mobility applications for controlling wheelchairs. And I'm happy to say that Alexa, Amazon Alexa is also included in our system that we've developed. So any kind of skills that you would want to be able to use, whether that's setting timers or reminders or sending out emergency alerts to your friends and family, or just ordering something on Amazon Prime, we have all of that technology available in our system. Now, this first version, Cognixion 1, is still in the regulatory process, so it's not currently available for sale or reimbursement, but we continue to work with the FDA and CMS to get this validated so that we can get this cleared as soon as possible. What you see on the right is a derivative version of that system. We call it the Axon R. And what we've done is, as a result of letting people know about the Cognixion 1, many scientists and researchers wanted to get access to the core system, but be able to use it to build their own applications for other healthcare use cases, including diagnostics and therapeutics, remote healthcare monitoring, telehealth, and a number of other things such as bionic integrations with exoskeletons and so on. So what I'm happy to say is that this version on the right is available today for sale, but it's not for sale to end users. It's just for sale to universities that are doing research in neuroscience and human factors and human augmentation. It's also for sale for hospitals and clinics that are doing research in neurology and ophthalmology and a number of other specialties. I'm going to forego a little bit about how it works to save some time. But what you can see here is, with the dots that are represented in red, these are all things that are considered durable medical equipment. So with Medicare and Medicaid, these are reimbursement codes that already exist that cover augmentative communication, smart home and IoT controls or environmental controls, computer controls, as well as mobility and wayfinding. But what we see as future possibilities is that if you're wearing these systems for basic daily active living, you could also utilize these for healthcare as well. So this is really kind of the future. Here's a table that gives you an idea. You know, we heard Michael talk earlier about 3.5 million Americans that need this kind of technology, but it's actually more than that. But when we think about the usefulness of BCI for daily living, that's, I think, what we're referring to. So there's actually roughly 22 million people in the United States alone that have conditions that would benefit from what we call assisted reality or augmentative technologies. So, as a result of this, we believe that 80 to 100% of the ALS community would benefit from a BCI or assisted reality. We think about 40% of the cerebral palsy market as a community would benefit from what we're talking about here. And stroke, there are a lot of people in the world who've had strokes, and many of them have had multiple strokes that impact speech and motor. And so we want to be able to make our technology available to them as well. This is a diagram that we've put together to try and share sort of our perspective and what we've learned from the community with our pals. And so what we've seen is that there is a steady state of our cognitive abilities and our emotions and our life and our friendships and social circles. Meanwhile, our motor abilities and peripheral motor system just doesn't want to cooperate, and it declines in not such a straight curve downward. And so today we're talking about BCI, but BCI is actually primarily aimed at the most late stage of ALS. Meanwhile, depending on who you are or where you are in your journey, you may need something that you can still use with your hands for now. But at some point, you're going to transition from hands to possibly head motion or speech, or when you start to lose the ability to move your head or speech, then you're going to need eye tracking, and then you're going to eventually need something to do with blinks or EMG or EEG or implants. So this truly is a journey. And like we said, we want to make sure that you have as many options to choose from to personalize your experience, regardless of where you are in your journey. And so I'm here to share sort of the non-invasive on-ramp for BCI, where we see that there's a great symbiotic relationship between invasive and non-invasive, or implantable and non-implanted systems, depending on what you're trying to do and where you are. I wanted to say, if you want to make a screenshot of this slide here, we have an app that's available today. So if you could still use your hands, or if you can move your face with smiles or eye movement or facial expressions like blinks, you can download this app today if you're in sort of an earlier or mid stage in your journey. And it's a very low cost solution for you as you're sort of working through the process of figuring out what your long-term access solution needs to be. And we're happy to, you can visit our website if you have questions about this, or you can just go straight to the Apple App Store and download it and try it straight away. This is an idea, though, or this is an example of what our system looks like for early stage ALS. So we've got keyboards in our system. We have the Alexa integration, and as you use it to compose your speech, it has speakers on board the headset that can speak out loud as well as display the text outward for your communication part.
Play some music.
So you can hear that it said play some music. It's prompting Alexa to actually play music. And as you're developing your communication, the AI is actually adapting to you over time. So as you listen to AI, and AI can help listen to your conversations and suggest responses that are based on your personal AI.
That chili lasagna was a hit, wasn't it?
I know, it was so spicy, I thought our heads would explode.
And so this individual is just looking at these flickering dots, and the brain...
Uncle John's face was a sight to behold.
We can detect which item you're paying attention to through your EEG.
Yeah, do you think you could help me with the recipe this year?
I'm going to skip ahead here, but we've also been testing with even the most clinically locked in individuals, and based on a slightly personalized language model, you can increase success, speed, and accuracy of affirmative closed-end questions, yes or no questions, or other kinds of things that you might be able to do with a handful of selection options. This is great for if someone's has like a traumatic injury and has been admitted into an ICU. This is also good for in-home use. So I'm going to show some videos here. I'm going to skip ahead. This shows you an example of, you may know Jay Smith. He's one of our brainiacs. He's in Oslo.
Jay, I'm going to take a video here. See. Can I get a smile? I'm getting it set up. This is cool.
what is your name? And so the model that I loaded actually we took from Jay's online writings and created a GPT model based on his online profile, data we can collect or whatever. So it should have some idea who he's talking to. So you're going to see some blinking patterns. This is the blinking I was talking about. So you can just kind of move your eyes around and just hover over each one. And then if you go to the top, that's where you speak. Just focus your attention at the top. Let's see if we can get that to work. There you go. Do one more time at the top. Do it twice.
You can call me Jay.
You did it.
Have you used a brain interface before?
No.
And if it's not exactly right, you can go to refine and then change it positive or negative, or you can go to follow up and ask me a question.
I have some experience with brain interfaces.
So you can see that it's working for communication. This is what it looks like on the inside, if you're curious about it. So it's actually listening through the microphone to the conversation. It's captioning that conversation, and your personal AI is suggesting options to respond, which you can tailor if you don't like the ones that are suggested. Or you can just select the one that you want and speak it out loud.
I've been better, thank you.
This is also how it can be used for powered wheelchair control. So the exact same interface with the mobile communication to the wheelchair controller is in development right now at the University of Waterloo in Canada. And this was actually partially funded by the ALS Association. And you can see how this is a student, not an ALS patient, but the student is driving the wheelchair just using mental fixation on UI controls in the heads-up display. So this is all stuff that's coming. And it's coming through Axon R as a development platform, which is a multi-sensory sort of mind-body physiology system. It's currently shipping now today in the US and Canada. We'll be shipping worldwide in the fall. And if anyone on this call is interested in joining any IRB-based waitlist for testing with any of our collaboration partners that are at clinics or universities in the US and Canada, just visit that QR code and contact us through the website, and we'd be happy to talk to you about getting set up. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very enlightening, Andreas. And I will say Jay Smith and his entire family in Austin are incredibly inspiring members of our ALS community. We know them personally. And, all of us on this call who have ALS experience, lived experience in our lives, none of us wanted it. We have it. And with that, all I will say, we've been on this journey for 7 years with my incredibly strong husband. Whatever we can do as members of the community, as people who live with this condition, that the feedback is incredibly important. The really participating in anything and everything that we can. Cognixion was at our home not too long ago, a couple of years ago. We collected some data. It's all about collecting data and helping the companies really fine-tune their technologies and make it a certain way where we can all benefit from these technologies, where our loved ones can benefit. We as caregivers, we as family members can really start living the life that we want to live with them, and to be able to share our thoughts and our feelings and really be able to make them as independent as possible. This is so very important and so crucial that, yes, the scientists are on this call and they're working extremely hard, and I'm personally so grateful to each and every one of them. And also as a community, we will say that we as a community want this to happen. We as a community want to bring this to fruition so that people who are here today and come after us will really, truly benefit. So with that, I really want to thank all the panelists. We're going to go over to Q&As. We have several wonderful questions that have come through. So we will just get right into it. And I'm going to ask these questions, and some of them are directed to a particular person, but most of them are general. So I'm going to pose the question, and please go ahead and take the question if you feel that you have a good answer for it. So the first one is simple. How much does BCI cost? Now, of course, that's going to require two separate answers. We've got the non-invasive with Cognixion, and then the invasive modalities as well. So Precision, would you like to go first? Dr. Craig?
Yeah, I mean, we're still, as I mentioned, a few years away from having a device on market, so we don't yet have a cost. I will say that, implantable medical technology like Precision, is both expensive to develop, and then there's going to be surgeries and costs associated with it. I think what Spencer said was great, that the entire community is really focused on making sure that the technology is not only cleared, but covered by insurance, so that the cost to patients should be, minimal in order to benefit from accessing this technology. So as we talk about access, there's the timeline for development and getting regulatory clearance, but really importantly, that needs to be coupled with ensuring that the technology, once it's proven safe and effective, is covered by insurance so that patients have access to it, because we don't see this as being a technology that patients should have to pay out of pocket for accessing.
Absolutely. And as we know at different conferences that we've also attended together, it is really important to have the lived experience and people from the community really speaking up for Medicare coverage, et cetera. And those things become very important, and they will as time goes on. So thank you for that. Can we have an answer from Cognixion?
Yeah, absolutely. So the medical version, the Medicare version that we've been developing, the Cognixion One, was sort of aimed to be about equivalent as an alternative to Tobii. So a Tobii Dynavox system is anywhere from 10 to 25,000, is kind of in that reimbursement range. Medicare covers that, a large portion of that. And so that's kind of the target for that. But for your out-of-pocket, that would be, for Medicare, that would be zero, or Medicaid, that would be zero. Private insurance would come down to your copay or deductible. So that's kind of the envelope that we're looking at for the medical version. The research version is about the same price. It's a little bit higher because we offer some development tools and support to organizations that are doing research. It's kind of an open box in building your own applications. So it's a slightly different product. I think to your point that you just made, there's a lot of active conversations happening at the FDA right now. There's a lot of active conversations happening at CMS right now. There's a lot of active conversations in standards bodies that are happening right now. And many of those, the speakers here are involved in, but we can only do so much to move their hearts and their wallets, right? So, and those individuals that are making decisions in Congress and in the Senate and the House of Representatives, each and every one of you could have a groundswell of influence to push the agenda forward collectively to help move BCI forward and really put more pressure on regulators to make things happen, because it is awfully slow. And we know that time is of the essence for each and every one of you and everyone else that we're working with.
Thank you. I couldn't have said that better. So a lot of encouragement for participation and really getting out there and asking for what we need as a community. Martha?
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes. So we have such great questions from all of the attendees at times. Why is high bandwidth needed when most brain waves are less than 10 cycles per second and then the fastest at 80 hertz?
Yeah, I assume maybe that question was directed at me, and I'll take a first pass at that. Thank you for that question. I mean, I think it's definitely true that using, that there's using, say, non-invasive EEG the traditional signals, as well as most of the power and brain activity, are in lower frequency ranges. But when you use invasive devices, including devices like ours, as well as penetrating devices, you're getting access to information that's at much faster time scales and much smaller spatial scales than are possible with non-invasive techniques. So in the types of devices that we're seeing information up to 150, 200 hertz and unique information at very small spatial scales. So each of the electrodes I showed is actually giving unique information about the electrical activity in that local context. We think that's going to be really important for driving high performance function. And that's exactly why we're trying to create, there's obviously downsides to invasive techniques. It's a surgery, you're accessing the brain, but it's really important to be able to be inside of the skull in order to access that information. And so, and just to say this is like a brain computer interface is a communication channel. To use an analogy we're familiar with, there were certain applications that were possible with dial-up, but nowadays we wouldn't be on Zoom with hundreds of people if we didn't have higher bandwidth communication channels. And so we believe that, the ability to create high bandwidth channels with the brain will enable us to create higher performing communication functions, to be able to do speech motor activity at higher and higher rates and function for patients. But ultimately, I agree with you. This is not a technique that's going to be like more bandwidth is better. It's going to be defined by what function can be returned to patients and how does that actually improve people's quality of life and independence. So that's something that we all have to demonstrate. But that's why we focus on high bandwidth interfaces.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Martha, if you want to ask that follow-up question.
Yes, and that goes right into another question. Thank you. That was a great explanation. So how do you translate the actual brain waves into functional speech and motion?
So you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that. That's a great question. That's sort of the magic, right? So it comes down to a little bit of the neuroscience behind brain-computer interfaces. If you look at, and let me just say up front that there are actually a number of ways to decode speech from the brain, and I'll just briefly describe one of them. If you look at the primary motor cortex in the brain, which is the area of the brain that more or less goes kind of directly into the spinal cord and controls the musculature of the body, you can actually see sort of a map of the whole body along that strip of the motor cortex. And so if you put electrodes over the part of that strip that are responsible for controlling, for example, like the muscles around the lips and the face and the throat, then when a person imagines speaking, those same areas of the brain activate in the same ways as if they had been speaking. And so the brain-computer interface can read those electrical signals and infer the intended words or the intended sounds coming out of the device. And so that's one, I think, fairly common approach to decoding speech.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how were candidates selected for clinical studies as well as implants in general? And second part of that question is, are volunteers with ALS welcome and at which stage?
I can just say briefly, and then I'm sure Craig can and Cognixion can have some other comments there. Blackrock, on their website, we have a page specifically for clinicians and for individuals. I think we can put the link in the chat probably, but we have links to the various clinical trials that are using Blackrock technology. Each of those trials will have their own set of inclusion and exclusion criteria, which they can go through with people who are interested.
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now, as I mentioned, we're testing this at a few universities in specific research studies that are dictated by our collaborators. None of them are yet enrolling individuals with ALS, but I would encourage you over the next year, we and other companies are creating registries that will at least notify individuals when particular clinical trials become available. And, please reach out to our engagement list and we'll add you to our list of folks to communicate with as research trials become eligible. But we absolutely do foresee in the future enrolling clinical trials that will involve the ALS community.
Andreas, would you like to answer that too?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to give two resources. In the chat, I added a link to our website where you can visit, and you can just click on there to fill out a form, and you can request to contact us or join a wait list for testing the system. And like the others, we do have collaborators who are doing these studies under their own what's called IRB, which is an institutional review board. Essentially, you just need to have peer-reviewed safety things in check, and a lot of protocol around how these studies are done, where it's appropriate to have a university or a hospital do that. So we have a number of these organizations that are working with us to do different kinds of studies using our platform. So depending on what you wanted to do, whether it's wheelchair control or smart home control or communication or something else, we could direct you to the right partner who's working with Cognixion. There's also, I think, Alana, you had dropped a thing in chat as well. Clinical trials, is it clinicaltrials.gov, I think is a place to go to check out what's currently actively being recruited for, whether it's a phase 1, 2, or 3 trial. And so those are options as well for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I would encourage the audience to please look at the chat. There are some really good resources and links over there. So go ahead and grab those if you can, if you're interested. The next question is, what are some of the hindrances or obstacles for FDA approval of the BCI devices? What are some things that are going on that might get in the way, and what can the community do to help?
I'll start. Well, first question, is anyone on the FDA on the call? Sorry, I don't want to hurt any feelings. No, the FDA, we've been working with the FDA for about 3 years, just having different levels of conversations. And like I said, we received breakthrough device designation. For us, as far as non-invasive, typically the FDA wants you to narrow the scope so tightly that there's very little margin for exploration about what's possible. And so we've sort of focused on building a technology that's useful for many populations, but they've requested that we narrow it to sort of the smallest population in the smallest phase with the smallest value proposition. So our interactions with the FDA were start with late stage ALS individuals that can no longer use eye tracking. And then the challenge there is, how do you get the how do you test and validate a communication system for its accuracy when the user can't communicate in any other way? So it's a debacle to try and sort out. And so that's an issue that we work through. Other areas are just having enough exposure to lived experience to understand all the different places and conditions that individuals would want to use a BCI. So obviously, if you have an implant, I would imagine you can go anywhere with it, depending on sort of what you're connected to. With the wearable device, you have other environmental considerations. If it's hot out or cold out, or if it's wet and raining, or if it's not raining. So there's a bunch of things that you have to be mindful of from a safety perspective. That, again, it's just safety controls and general and special controls that you have to be mindful of.
Right. And since you're speaking right now, let me just ask you a couple of more questions that were directed towards you, and then we'll come back to the other FDA questions. How much eye control do you need for Cognixion to be usable and effective? So you demonstrated Jay, and you demonstrated other people, but there are people who are essentially locked in with little to no eye movement. So what is the amount of eye control that is needed for Cognixion?
0 to 1 degree of eye movement is generally sort of what we say is the minimum. So we learned early on that even at the latest stage, you have what's called like ocular motor decline, where you have involuntary eye movement, where even though you're trying to look at one thing, your eyes sort of drift in a particular direction. Or you might have difficulty keeping an eyelid open, and you sort of resort to like one pupil that's available. And so, having a user interface that can adapt to your eye position so that you don't have inadvertent eye selections is really, really important. So we've thought about that and built that into the software to be able to personalize or sort of adapt that to the individual's stage. So if you have eye control, then you can use eye control. If you don't have eye control, then you can use it without. I can get into sort of the science of it, but there's sort of two ways of paying attention to something. There's overt or explicit attention that you're paying to something. So if I'm holding up my two hands, right, and I have like one is a circle and one is my hand is open, even if you can't look at one of those, we know which one you're paying attention to, right? And so if you're paying attention based on I'm explicitly trying to look at the hand that's open, that's called overt attention. If I'm trying to ignore something, like I'm intentionally trying to not look at something, that's called covert attention. And so we can distinguish in your brainwaves whether you're trying to pay attention to something or you're trying to ignore something. So that provides enough sort of strength to be able to bifurcate which things to interact with through the visual cortex.
I think that's very good news for people who may be locked in or close to locked in. So the one of the other questions for you, Andreas, that's come up about the actual devices. What is the average weight of the non-invasive device?
Mm-hmm. It's about, well, I'll let Chris answer that question. He's our CTO.
It's around 500 grams in that range, but it's actually strapped onto the head, and so that matters a bit less than the weight distribution, which we've tried to engineer to make sure that it didn't induce unnecessary neck strain for the users. But what we've actually seen, for example, what you saw with Jay, was that he has the head strap system on his wheelchair, and actually the system sits nice and snugly right between there. And then once you put the head strap on, then actually the weight is not really an issue at that point.
And for those of you who don't deal with metrics, 500 grams is about a pound.
Okay, great. Thank you. Martha?
Thank you, Andreas. That was my next question there for the audience. A very exciting technology. We have another question. Obviously, tonight, this is ALS that we're talking about. We're speaking about neurological traumas, stroke, spinal cord injury. But what stage of ALS do you recommend people living with these limitations start to entertain looking into BCI?
I'll go first. I would say as soon as you're diagnosed, because of a number of factors. One, it takes time for things to get approved. You're going to have a battery of all kinds of assessments to determine which type of thing you might want. You're going to need to deal with funding processes. So there's a lot of lead time that you should be mindful of. So I would suggest anyone that's working in neurology that's making a diagnosis to suggest that they should start looking at a BCI or BCI as a category. It should be in their awareness of things that they should be looking at some point. When you might actually want to sign up to start using one, I mean, obviously at Cognixion, we've sort of thought about the early, mid, and late stage to say, we can use EEG or non-invasive for sort of transitional late stage, but you could also use head pointing for earlier stage so that you could get into it earlier and start training your language model. The problem is that a lot of people wait till the last minute and they don't have enough time to learn how to use the system or get it funded or actually train it in a way that could be really personal. So I would say the earlier the better.
Anybody else? Craig, Spencer?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is clearly implantable invasive solutions are going to be for a more, severe phase, at least in the early days of, when does it make sense to consider an invasive solution? For ALS in particular, we're particularly focused on communication restoration. So that obviously for each individual is going to occur at a different stage and development. And I think there's going to be a personal component of this to when do you feel like the potential benefit of a invasive solution outweighs the potential risks. I think, it's too early to say exactly at what stage, because until we have provided the clinical evidence, it's going to be very hard for anybody to make an informed decision. That's what the upcoming regulatory process and broader adoption of this technology is going to help us establish. That being said, at Precision, part of the reason we focused on safe and reversible solutions is because we want to make sure that this technology is available as early in the journey as possible, and that's going to require not only providing significant benefit but minimizing potential risks of the technology. So I think that's shared by all of the companies, and we all are going to have, depending on at certain points, different opinions on when that threshold is going to be hit. And like I said at the outset, the most important point is that there's a host of options available to individuals and their families to consider to help support them through the journey.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think great answers, from the perspective of lived experience and all the different roundtables or meetings and conferences that I've attended and been a part of. One of the things that from a lived experience perspective, we always say from the community perspective, at least, when we were first diagnosed 7 years ago, and I know that it's true even today, there's not enough education and awareness about non-invasive and invasive BCIs for ALS patients. I completely agree that all of this should be presented as options down the road. Of course, it may not be on day one, but some people get there, unfortunately, a little sooner, others a little later. But to know and to be aware of what's out there, I think, is crucial. And that is where we need the community to, really start talking about. We need the education, we need the awareness, and we need the clinics and the doctors to really be aware and educated about this, so that we as the community and the people living with ALS can benefit from these as soon as they need it, and maybe even before. So I think that's really, truly important.
And Dr. Shelena, I think there's something like 11,000 neurologists in the United States.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of people, but it's actually not. So, you could probably get the ear of 10% of them and they would tell the other 90%.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there's just not enough awareness and education, and that's one of the big things that we're in the IBCI-CC, we're working on what is going to help the end user. And that's what it's all about. It's really all about the community. So with that, we'll just go on to the next question. This is specifically for Spencer. Do you have a link or database for the 17 abstracts that were related to ALS that you mentioned?
Yeah, good question. So I have two answers to that. One, I'm very happy to provide the papers that we found. These are all, publicly available scientific papers. But yeah, that's no problem. I'll just say after that, and also you can email me. I think Alana put a link or put my email address in hers in the chat. But also we will be publishing the results of our study, and I think there will be a lot more kind of discussion and information around those papers in that publication. Reading the raw papers, it'll be interesting and informative for sure. But a lot of the kind of considerations about how this applies and the ways in which we might use these tools, that comes probably more from the publication we'll put out than from the papers directly.
I would, this is Andreas with Cognixion. Also, I do want to sort of shed some light too. We could probably have a second hour of a masterclass from the implantable folks here around not just, we've been talking mostly about sort of the sort of prosthetic nature of controlling a computer or talking and driving wheelchairs, like that part of life. But there's a tremendous impact, I think, for implants to do other things as well. So, for instance, if somebody wants to do something with their eyes closed, can you do anything with your eyes closed? Well, that's where an implant would be pretty amazing. Also, beyond doing things, being able to have, there's a lot of guessing games as a caregiver. You're like, oh, well, are they comfortable? Like I'm seeing their blood pressure rise. Why is their blood pressure rising? And you're doing like guessing games with like pulse ox and other things to see, are they stressed out? So there's a lot of sort of other diagnostic or assessment or even therapeutic closed loop like stimulation stuff that could be done invasively that's far superior to any kind of guessing games that you could do externally. So I don't want to sort of open this up for 2 or 3 more hours, but that might be an area you might want to pursue looking at too, because life is more than just communicating and like flipping through TV channels. There's a lot of things going on there. So
yeah, thank you for that.
Well, listen, we could definitely talk about this for at least another couple of hours. This is such an interesting topic with so many interesting questions coming through. And we apologize in advance that we couldn't get through every single question. But you have a lot of resources here that are in the chat. And I would highly recommend that you stay in touch with the companies and really do our part as a community to help in whatever way we can to try to bring these technologies to fruition. Really, really excited to have the panelists here. Want to thank the panelists for their time and all the great work that they do from all of us in the ALS community at Everything ALS. I want to thank Everything ALS and the entire team for the great work that they always do. And Sarita, anything that you want to add before we wrap it up?
I just want to send a huge thank you to all the presenters and you, Dr. Shell. That was an interesting and very engaging session we had today. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn this over to McFinn.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I know this was a pretty technical explanation of how we can communicate and move, but this is what we want because, in the old days, we could have a wheelchair that we had to roll with our hands. Well, now we're going to have one that we can roll with our eyes. So it's a new world, and we all need to contact these gentlemen as often as possible so that they know really what we care about deeply, because that's what they want to know. They want to know what's the biggest problem you have, because I'm not interested in the little one. I want to know what's really bugging you. And so that's the kind of emails that you want to send these gentlemen, these researchers, these, what do they call them? Angels on earth, with, having a purpose. And each one of us has a purpose. That's why we're here. We're all trying to cure ourselves. And these gentlemen are here to help us move that along. So if you have, we have just a few more minutes, but we have enough minutes to open it up to anyone who would like to make a comment. Brian Kelly, how you doing out there? Oh, just a minute, Brian. Flip, is it FJP? Would you like to say a few words? Oh, gotcha. No problem. Yeah, the hearts, buddy. That's, love is, that's why we're here, because we love each other. And these doctors are here because they love their work. And we're here to say, keep loving your work, because we want to love each other for a long time. Having another year in our lives is so important. Having another day is so important. And be able to communicate with our loved ones, there's nothing more important, because they want to know how you are doing. Folks, this is your community. And I am so proud of you for showing up constantly, because this is something that will change your attitude. It might change your life, and it might change somebody else's life in one of these squares. If you had a victory this week, somebody would love to hear about that. And if you had a real problem this week, we'd really love to hear about it, because that's why we get together. I mean, there were 90 or more people here tonight. That is 90 minds who have power together. So yeah, 100. There you go. Numbers are important, because each one of you is an individual, and each one of you are having different experiences. And those are the things that make you qualified to be a detective of ALS. And each one of us needs to feel like we're important. This is a disease that is taking some things away from us, but it's also aiding us in some ways, deep inside, because we're really feeling how loved we really are and how people really care about our lives. And so here we are. We've been together for a little over almost 4 years now. And Sean, come aboard, Sean. Tell us a little bit about what you saw, what you heard.
I thought it was just an amazing presentation. It's one of those things that are so important for someone like Dee Dee, who really could use something like this today, but a lot of us, it's going to be something in the future, right? So, but the amazing technology coming forward is incredible. Really well done. Good to hear.
Yeah, and Sean, Andreas here, I'd like to sort of say too, it's, we're talking about in less than a decade, everything that you saw today is going to be available, right? In some cases, the non-invasive stuff's available now, and then for reimbursement in the next couple of years. So, I don't be sad or let down like it's some far future thing. This is stuff that's happening right now. And, if you can encourage policymakers to clear the way for things to happen, and if you can encourage investors and high net worth family offices to keep putting money into these endeavors, to kind of, whether it's grants or investment or whatever, to keep putting wind in the sails of these initiatives, that's what keeps it going. Right? There's a lot of passion here, but hold the network effect together and it'll happen faster.
Yeah, and if we're squeaky wheel, it'll even happen a little bit faster. Excuse my echo. So for you, everything ALS is here. And for us, you are here and you make the difference. It is the numbers that show up, that show us get to work. We'd like to take a holiday, and we do every once in a while, because I say, this is a consuming passion. And sometimes we think about you folks right before we go to sleep. And then we say, God, it's your turn. My people need to go to sleep and I need to go to sleep, but I need some rest and inspiration. So every night I say my prayers and I send it all out to all of you in the world who are suffering. And I'd love it for you all to do the same, because our prayers and our thoughts are powerful, they're real. We are energy beings giving love. It's our main occupation. So the time of day has come again when we will be able to see each other in a short amount of time, because time is sailing by quick. All of you who are a little bit older know that your day just went by, boom. And so that's why we want to make sure that you're doing everything you can, you researchers, okay? We want to make sure that you are working day and night, and we are going to be working day and night thinking about you and trying to improve our day. With that, folks, each one of you are special, and I know you know it. So, Steffi, let's start it out. Folks, let's say goodnight to each other. Pick somebody out and say goodnight to them.
I say cheers and good night.
Hey, thanks for being here. So good to see you, Ruth. Brian Kelly, I'm sorry I didn't get you out there, Brian, but there you go. Thank you, brother. Right on. And Rodney, thank you for being with us tonight. And Lynn, we're going to see you soon. Andreas, thank you so much. And Susan and Ruben, my two heroes. Thank you. Two saints, that's right, dear. Thank you so much.